Hey, Truck Top guys and gals, it sounds counterintuitive and crazy. I know, but give this some thought.
It is time for Canada to think bigger when it comes to cars. One industry leader says it's not enough to just build for others. He's calling for a national conversation on a made-in-Canada automaker.
Canada now has its first ever fully functional, fully Canadian electric vehicle. It's called Project Aero, and it's a collaboration between more than 50 auto parts makers, 2 universities, and thousands of hours of blood, sweat, and tears.
Wondering if there are any vehicles that are currently considered Canadian-made, and if there are, why aren't we highlighting them?
America is the full-size pickup truck capital of the planet. In fact, full-size pickup trucks aren't even sold in a large part of the world, mainly due to the fact that they won't fit down most European and Asian roads, parking stalls, or city centers, and threaten to drive over fountains, monuments, and in monster truck fashion, all probably pissed off because there's no Starbucks drive-thrus. But anyway, that's not my point. My point is that I'm going to make a compelling case that the best place to manufacture full-size electric pickup trucks moving forward, making money doing it, and sell more units is by realizing that the best way to accomplish this is to stop making any of them in the United States of America. Really. And if I'm right, those wanting more EV trucks in America might want to pitch their favorite EV truck maker on doing the exact opposite of what the U.S. administration is currently demanding of the auto sector, and how zigging when everyone else zags could corner the second largest and, more importantly, rapidly growing EV truck market. Think I'm nuts? Well, call the shrink and get the meds out of the glove box, because we're about to get totally trucked up. This channel is limping along. It's still doing its best, and it managed to achieve the almost mythical number for me of 5,000 subscribers. I mean, we've got a community of 5,000 people, and I'm so excited also to announce that we're closer than ever to keeping the show on the road with sponsorship support, but we're not there yet, and that makes you the ones keeping the tires from falling off. So please get yourself a wonderful t-shirt, a sweater, hat, bumper sticker by visiting the Truck Top store. That helps dramatically for the channel. Consider joining Patreon and becoming a member. All of this keeps the lights on and helps partially pay for it all. So thank you very much for being a part of this sometimes challenging but incredible journey. There's a couple of important things to know about current light-duty pickup truck sales. Canada sells the most pickup trucks in the world, only second to the United States. And according to driving.ca, well, they like the big trucks too, with 87% of all sales being the full-size versions. Last year, Canadians bought 372,000 of the things. By comparison, that still dwarfs United States sales, with Americans buying 2.2 million of those super size me biggie fries pickups. But Canada's representing 16% of all full-size trucks that have been bought. And that's very impressive, being that Canada's population is 1/10 that of the United States. But what's hidden in those details from an electric truck perspective is a very revealing hint that things are going in an entirely different direction here in the Great White North. Look, after no lack of trying, because I did, and I've been unable to round up stats from all of the major OEMs on their EV truck sales here in Canada, receiving nothing but smug dead air, I was still able to glean some 2023 data from StatCan. StatCan is a Statistics Canada. It's a government site where actual EV truck sales were separated from EV SUV sales, something that is usually lumped together. And what I found out was that in 2023, barely affected by Rivian's very sparse and lofty priced R1T truck sales in Canada, we know those were very small in 2023, barely denting the numbers. And before all other rivals had even arrived here in Canada, and the only full year where we know Ford started actually shipping Lightnings to Canada en masse, total EV truck sales in that year were 5,172 units. Even if we give a few hundred of those to the R1T, we can glean, based upon the gross vehicle weight rating category and the other options available in Canada under the StatsCan's data, the lion's share of those sales were Lightnings. Who cares? So what? Well, here's where the numbers get a little creamy. In 2023, Ford only produced a total of 24,165 Lightnings. Think about this. It means that 1 out of every 5 F-150 Lightnings made was sold in Canada. And that's with very restricted allocation off the U.S. lines, prioritizing U.S. dealer, the big, huge U.S. dealer groups. Even more, none of those Canada-bound Lightnings in 2023 qualified for any consumer incentives, since the Pro was only available at the time for fleets, and Ford wasn't allocating any to Canada anyway. At the same time, Ford was jacking MSRP rates through the roof, trying to milk its loyal customers, putting even the XLT standard range battery pack beyond the incentive cap here in Canada. In 2024, the Pro became available to Canadian consumers, and it and the XLT standard range qualified for incentives for the very first time, which further explains how that market share has increased even more since. From two sources, one from a large Ford dealership that did not want to be mentioned, and the other from an off-the-record response from within GM Canada about their Canada electric truck sales so far in 2025, adoption has not declined in Canada since 2023, but accelerated right across the country. What's surprising is BC's a big market, but Quebec as well has been buying a lot of electric trucks. Again, no one's separating numbers for us here, okay? But let's look at what we do have. In the first quarter of 2025, GM Canada sold roughly 5,750 electric vehicles in Canada. That's in one quarter. Just GM, including the GMC Hummer EV pickup, if you want to call it that. This made GM the top EV seller in Canada. Specifically, the GMC Hummer EV pickup saw sales increase by 232% compared to the previous quarter. Of course, in the previous quarter, it could have just sold like 2. But anyway, it looks really good on paper. Hey, this is post-production editing Simon here. Just want to throw in one little tidbit that I almost missed going through the Electrek article and then going to the GM site where they're bragging about the fact that they're now #1 in Canada for Q1. But inside of that, they did mention their top 3 selling vehicles. And guess what number 2 was? Their Chevrolet Equinox EV led the way in 2025 for Q1 with almost 2,000 units sold, 1,892 units sold, followed by the Silverado EV selling 894 units in Q1 2025, just shy of 1,000 units sold. What's important is how much that represents of overall output, overall production of the Silverado EV for the entire production line. That's a big deal. Back to the video, back to previous Simon, leaving future Simon now. Bye. But it gets even rosier in Canada while getting increasingly worse in the US. Let's take a look at EV adoption rates between the two countries. In 2024, US EV sales in general rose by 7.3% over 2023, leading to about 1.3 million EV units sold in the country. Keep in mind, this is pre-Trump and pre-tariffs. Even then, it's pretty pathetic for the size of market the U.S. represents, especially when compared to the numbers of EVs sold globally. It's a laggard, representing only 10% of the global market share and only represents 8.1% of all passenger vehicles sold in the United States that year. Comparatively, in 2024, zero-emission vehicles, ZEVs, in Canada accounted for 15.4% of new vehicle sales. At 264,000 units, that means Canada represents 1.55% of global EV sales. It's moving towards 2% of global EV sales, even though its population only represents less than 0.5%. But what matters is what's coming. In the US, the current administration is trying to claw back or remove entirely all EV incentives and going one step further by penalizing its citizens for driving a vehicle that's more efficient, produces less carbon by slapping a $250 per year road usage fee on every registered EV in America. But furthermore, it's making it almost impossible for all vehicle manufacturers, all of them, including the big three, from producing any EVs at a profit by not only taxing the crap out of parts coming from overseas or Canada and Mexico, and many of those parts, by the way, from overseas, America can't manufacture domestically anyway because it doesn't own the intellectual property rights. But even if it gets that foreign company to make the damn stuff in the US, taking years to build the new factories and investing billions of frickin' dollars in a precarious economic house of frickin' cards, it still doesn't escape all the tariffs because the tech is foreign. No, I'm not kidding. In Canada, it's the opposite. Although Canadians, like Europeans a year ago, have been holding off buying EVs this first quarter of 2025 because they're looking for free cash. They're just waiting to see if the government was going to bring back Canada's zero incentives for zero emission vehicles, or IZEV. Yeah, just yet another acronym. I think it's IZEV, ZEV. Maybe it's an Apple product, IZEV. I don't know. I'm just sick of acronyms. Nobody understands what anyone's freaking saying anymore.
What's bustin', bro? Did you peep the new Skibbity drop? Where the fuck?
Even in Europe, European EV sales for 6 months slumped because a lot of the governments had started to cancel or postpone some of their EV incentives. We saw that drop off until people realized incentives there weren't coming back. And since then, sales have not only rebounded, but dramatically accelerated. Canada just announced that they're going to be refunding, like they're going to put money back in. They're going to refund. What's up with the English language? Who came up with these words, refunding and then means refund? Oh yeah, the English. After its incredible popularity of that EZEV program drained the funds that were assigned to it in the first place. Okay, it wasn't like they canceled it because we don't believe in EVs, we're going to get rid of this. No, it was so popular, everybody used it, and it drained its allocated funds way earlier than expected. That's what happened. And although the details aren't yet out on the new version that they're relaunching, it looks like the program will be expanded rather than pulled back. More vehicles we hope will be included, getting rid of ridiculous things like MSRP price caps and stupid things like that. I mean, if it's an electric instead of a gas, who gives a crap how much the person has to pay? If it gives them an incentive to buy the electric over the gas, why are you stopping that from happening? Do you want someone driving a $150,000 V12 or a $150,000 zero-emission vehicle? I mean, stupid freaking bureaucracy, just... I'm okay, I'm fine. And if the government is smart, most EV pickup trucks should make the cut, whatever their MSRP, which would dramatically boost their Canadian sales even further and help adoption in the last holdout, the last bastion of light-duty passenger vehicles that need to move toward electrification here in Canada. The bottom line is this: Canada is pro-EV, and the government is going to back that up with hard dollars. There's also been a lot of strong signals coming from this new government that any investments in the auto sector might come with some large public rewards, like was the case with VW back in 2022. It received huge benefits to offset large portions of their initial investment because Canada gets it. Now that we've established that the U.S. might be slowing its EV adoption, or at the least not coming close to accelerating at the pace of the rest of the planet, and that Canada is pulling out all the stops to take EV adoption to the next level, why would any startup or established automaker waste their time setting up shop in Canada to make EV pickups it wants to sell in the U.S. anyway? Well, the real question is why wouldn't they? But the most important takeaway here is this: to get EV trucks off the ground and make a profit, the first thing a company should be seeking is widespread enthusiasm for the product. Americans don't have that. They have the lowest level of interest in EVs overall, and it seems to be the same case with EV trucks. If anything, interest in the United States is waning. The numbers bear this out. in that none of the models have yet to break 40,000 units in sales per year. Not the Cybertruck, not the Lightning, none of them. But now, flip it on its head. Imagine the second largest pickup truck market on the planet getting an added government incentive under a newly revised IZEV program, benefiting an increasingly patriotic nation that desperately wants nothing more than to buy everything domestic, and have the same program possibly double the incentive discount for any EV made in that country. Now, what if that same market incentivizes your initial manufacturing investment with subsidies, tax breaks, land assignment, preferred financing, and by allowing your company access to parts from anywhere in the world, tariff-free or with low tariffs? Even better, what if that country is far more diverse and offers readily available access to all the minerals and raw materials like the world's highest grade aluminum, steel, copper, lithium, and other critical minerals only a few hundred kilometers from your factory floor at most? And all of that is tariff-free because it's domestic. And what if your core operations and ramp up were to first sell only domestically and then move supply where conditions were ripe in other parts of the world that do buy pickups, reversing the standard practice and instead dominating a receptive, motivated market space that allows you to springboard back into the United States at your choosing, but with a product already breaking even or profiting? Every current American EV truck startup is only targeting numbers in the hundreds of units in its ramp. Look at Tello. They're looking at a few hundred units to start, having Aria build them for them. Or thousands, maybe with Slate. We know that Slate, up until 2031, plans to make 300,000 units by 2031 over a 5-year term. It's not hundreds of thousands. An incredibly easy target in a welcoming, enthusiastic, incentivized economy. Right now, there's 3 U.S. EV truck startups. We've talked about them here on the channel. I'm going to be doing an upcoming one where I put 2 of them head to head. Look out for that one. And I can choose from all of those to demonstrate this example of making these in Canada. We got Tello, we got Slate, we got Scout Motors. Being that Tello is designed specifically as an urban truck, with kind of San Francisco streets and tight parking in mind. That was a lot that went into building a truck that can do all the things that it can do, but fit in this really compact, like Mini Cooper space. That's according to the CEO directly. So it's not in that full-size pickup truck, even though many of its specs look like they might meet those things. And Slate's marketing itself as a mini, bare-bones eco truck. We're going to use Scout Motors as a model. Being its truck more closely emulates a full-size pickup both in specs and dimensions, and plans to offer both a pure EV version and an extended range EV version of its Terra truck and its Traveler SUV. Some of you are immediately going to point out that Scout Motors is too far along in developing its $2 billion South Carolina factory to pull the plug now. I mean, the write-off would be crippling. Well, guess what? The only thing that could cripple Scout Motors might be to proceed as planned and not sell any frickin' trucks. With a capacity eventually targeted at 200,000 units per year in a state and a country that isn't buying EV trucks to any large numbers and pumping out more EV FUD than a diesel truck subreddit, while turning its nose up at electrification and innovation and backpedaling toward the internal combustion engine, all while reservations and pre-orders are being canceled left, right, and center after OEMs are announcing 15 to 25% leaps in MSRP to offset the monster tariff horrors coming their way. I don't see how Scout will get to the 10th of that capacity in the next couple of years. All of Scout's plans came about in 2022 under an EV receptive administration. Scout Motors realized this and, likely in panic at first, introduced an E-Rev version in both models to kind of offset the impact, and immediately saw its order bank switch its preference. So it worked. But since then, however, Ram has postponed its E-Rev Ram charger yet again, and the effects of tariffs are coming home to roost. The numbers in the United States alone, as far as I can see, aren't possible to get Scout Motors to 200,000 units a year. It's that simple. Look at Rivian. It's struggling to get anywhere near those numbers, and it's had 2 retail vehicles on the market and 1 commercial van already being produced for years, and no EV lineup has even come close to 200,000 units per year in the United States. Combining well over a dozen models. I love GM. They just, okay, we've got all these different things. We got like 4 models. We got the same platform. We got the Ultium thing. How we can make a whole bunch. We'll make a Firebird, and then we'll make a Firestoke, and then we'll make a Firefly, and then we'll make a Fire Flinger, and then we'll make a Firefox, and then we'll make and then they put a spoiler on it and a thing on the back, and then a little wavy thing, and then they widen it and they do lift, and then they put they got so many freaking models. I just go on the lot and I'm so confused. But it's working. You definitely got choice. Anyway, if you take all those models and you stuff it in a cart, and you got like a baker's dozen of EV models, GM in total sold 114,432 EVs in all of 2024. And that was a whopping 50% increase from the previous year. More importantly, 20 to 25% of all those GM EV sales were in Canada, if Q1 2025 numbers are any indicator. Ford, GM, Stellantis, and VW have been closing projects all over the place and taking multi-billion-dollar write-downs due to the U.S.'s actions, killing domestic EV production and shelving huge EV plans for expansion, losing tens of thousands of domestic jobs in the process, and stifling the number one thing the U.S. relies on to bolster its domestic auto sector, and that's exports. The goalposts are changing daily. The U.S. market is like plastic C4 explosives. It's incredibly volatile. Like, don't poke it, especially for an auto industry where, you know, any plan to develop a battery plant or a vehicle plant involves years of development and billions of freaking dollars, only to have the rug pulled out from under the project at any given moment on a whim. No automaker can weather that. The U.S., in my view, is no longer a stable market for EV manufacturing. And its economy is going in the wrong direction as well. In the last quarter, the U.S. economy shrank 0.3%. You got another quarter of that, you're in a recession. Canada grew by 2.2%. Where would you rather build? Due to these factors, in my view, Scout's already dead in the water if it continues down the path it's on. But let's look at its parent VW and its plans to date and what it's doing in Canada right now, and where the Scout's batteries will likely be coming from. You tell me what would be the most logical and investment-safe way for Scout to proceed. The Volkswagen VW battery plant, known as PowerCo's Gigafactory, is currently under construction in St. Thomas, Ontario, and is projected to begin production in 2027. Around the same time, Scout said it hoped to be bringing its trucks and SUVs to market. The plant, a $7 billion investment, is being built over a 150-hectare property and is expected to create thousands of jobs. Volkswagen has stated that the plant is fully on track for its 2027 launch, despite all this crazy industry crap and headwinds and tariffs. We'll see if that actually holds true, but so far, so good. The plant will produce enough batteries to manufacture 1 million electric vehicles per year. Well, where do you think most of those vehicles will be sold? By the looks of things, it's certainly not in the United States. I don't think VW built this for the U.S. market specifically. I mean, let's look. Last year, VW sold a total of 49,400 EVs from every one of its models it offers in the U.S., a paltry number and far from the million-car capacity of the Canada plant. But even worse, that's a whopping 30% decline in sales over the 71,000 EVs it sold in the U.S. in 2023. So should it pull the plug on a $7 billion plant in Canada, already on track for completion in 2027, able to move those batteries literally tariff-free to most markets that it's dominant in, anywhere in the world, headed over to Europe where they got 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 EV sales a year, possibly set up supply to any other domestic auto manufacturer, you know, like Scout Motors. They can move those batteries to Asia. They can move those batteries likely anywhere in the world outside the United States anyway. So therefore, should Scout Motors take a short-term hit and temporarily shutter its South Carolina plant at a fractional total of that $2 billion cost overall that because it's only spent maybe several hundred million on it to date. Take the hit now, make it back later. Scout Motors would not only be welcome into a place like Canada with open arms, it could likely convince domestic government to shower it in subsidies and incentives if it promised a time frame and guaranteed employment numbers for the domestic production. And as mentioned earlier, it might be able to convince our amazing Minister of Industry. You got to check her out, Melanie Joly. This is one wise minister and in the perfect position right now. Everything she touches, she's done really well with. I think she's going to do amazing things with the incentives program. So maybe they could just do a little tweak, little, pat on the back and say, hey, Made in Canada incentive, double it up a little. That's really something that I think would be in the cards. Made in Canada electric vehicles, doubling the amount of money that you can get. That'll work. Scout Motors is planning a ramp that will take a few years, likely only producing a total of 50,000 units in its first year anyway, which is typical. If a company is looking for time to navigate through this U.S. upheaval, Canada looks like a pretty sweet spot to park and set up shop for the time being. The better news is that Norway and other Scandinavian countries that Canada celebrates doing business with, even going, south over the Pacific to Australia. We just bought a massive defense radar system, multi-billion-dollar system from them instead of the United States because it was better. So we've got a great relationship. We're working to build even stronger ties with so many of these countries. Well, so many of them just so happen to love EV trucks. Even Tesla has targeted Norway to sell its Cybertruck. Ford's already shipping Lightnings there. And if anyone thinks that so many amazing Americans who do embrace and rightly believe that electric trucks are amazing, and that's the right way to go, wouldn't work with their congressperson and pressure the administration to buy a made-in-Canada domestic EV truck like the 2 million cars Canada currently exports to the United States every year already, they need to give their head a serious shake. There are more Americans supporting Canada than buying into this false garbage being said about it. The naysayers will argue, of course, that to set up a new Canadian EV maker from scratch is simply too cost restrictive. But it's happening all over the world. In China, there's like 300 freaking companies all going at each other like freaking piranhas, all like super hyper capitalism, just fighting each other, price wars everywhere, startups everywhere, and they're all they're already made it to market. There's like so many different choices and options for EVs. And now it's like a price war there, just outright, extreme capitalism. Funny that we're seeing extreme capitalism in China. Anyway, that's happening there. It can easily happen anywhere else. There is no material benefit right now to producing Scout, Tello, Slate, GM's EV trucks, or even the Lightnings in the U.S. versus Canada. From every aspect, supply chain, distribution, technical know-how, incredibly well-trained, experienced automaking workforce, one of the world's most integrated parts supplier groups, direct raw materials and high-grade metals access, receptive government, excellent tax regime, and available infrastructure. Canada, on almost every front, actually makes a better business case. And the last but incredibly fun little point when it comes to Scout Motors is that the name Scout would truly be coming home. Although International Harvester was a U.S. company, International Trucks were made in Canada for decades, and the original Scout name was owned by a gentleman named Bruce Nodwell, a Canadian manufacturer of these tracked carriers. They're still around. I'll put it up on the screen. So that was him. And he sold the rights to the name Scout to International. So one could argue that we have a shared interest in the company succeeding and a truly patriotic comeback on both sides of the border. Hey, if you have some thoughts on the roadblocks to a Canadian-made EV truck that I've completely overlooked, or you think I'm totally batty, or you think we as a country should do even more in developing a far-reaching domestic auto company, please share your ideas in the comments below. I love reading them. As always, thanks for watching.